Well, hello. Welcome to Recruitability's Nothing Sacred podcast. As always, I'm Nat Elias, here with my co-host, Nick. How you doing, Nick?
Hey, doing great. And welcome to the Third Lamar studio to Eric Dunigan, our guest this week.
That's right. We're excited to be doing this on video in the Third Lamar production studios. This is a great setup.
Yeah. We did a little set design here. Wanted to make sure the colors matched Recruitability in the background. So
That's right.
Thank you for noticing.
I know. I noticed the little things, Nick. I noticed the little things.
It kind of reminds me of like a pallet, which I appreciate being in the shipping business.
That's right.
The wood.
Segue. Our guest today, Eric Dunigan, he's a great friend of mine. I'm so excited to have him on the podcast. He and I spent a lot of time and drinks talking about work, teams, retention, hiring strategies. I've learned a lot from what Eric's done with his business. He is the co-founder and president of Arrive Logistics, which is headquartered here in Austin, but you guys are Chicago. Where are some of the other locations?
San Antonio, Tampa. Opening up more offices. We'll get into kind of why, but yeah. Started here.
Well, tell us the quick story on Arrive. I think first off, to the person that has no idea what Arrive Logistics is, tell us the story and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yep. Okay. Arrive Logistics is I'll make it really simple, a freight brokerage, right? So we sit between the shipper and the trucking company. Shipping's a huge space. Logistics is a big word. Most all the business we do is domestic, middle mile truckload. Some people talk about final mile when someone drops off a package at your door, first mile, other things like that. 18-wheelers on the highway, that's what we do. Big fragmented space, big market. That's the market we play in. We get paid by a shipper. We turn around and we pay the trucking company. So that's the gist.
And this was your first job out of college?
So I'll kind of get into why I got into it.
Which is fascinating.
Which is kind of, hopefully it's fascinating. We'll see. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, Rust Belt town. Good town. That doesn't have a negative connotation, but just a Midwestern town. Good family. Big family. 5 siblings. But it was a blue-collar area, right? And so, like, one summer in college, I worked at a steel mill. One summer I worked for my mom's, the company she worked at, and just kind of worked in the warehouse. So the idea of being in a blue-collar industry didn't really scare me. I went to a liberal arts school in Ohio called Miami University, which people down here in Texas are like, Miami, Florida? No, it's in Ohio. Big Ben Roethlisberger went there.
Claim to fame. Everyone knows Big Ben.
Wally Zerbiak, too.
And Zerbiak,
and it's a pretty good school. It's a liberal arts school, more known in the Midwest and the East Coast. And so got into the business school. It's a great business school. And so I'm thinking, hey, I'm going to go out and make something of myself. And it was 2008, right, which we all remember was not the best year to enter the job market, I guess maybe compared to 2020 for some of those grads. And, I needed to figure out what I was going to do. I had student loans. I didn't really want to stay in Ohio. I just wanted to kind of see something new. And so Chicago was where I wanted to be. That was kind of my criteria. I went to the job fair, like a lot of us probably did. There was no handshake, or if there were recruiters, I certainly wasn't talking to them. Had a fraternity brother who worked at a big brokerage house in Chicago, the biggest at the time, still the biggest, called C.H. Robinson, big public company. And they had an office that was right downtown, good atmosphere. At that point, just getting an interview was a win, right? Let alone getting a job. So get the job. I think my offer was for $35,000 or $36,000. And I was like, done, let's do it. So I signed a lease. This was like fall of 08. I remember coming home for like winter break and I felt like I had made something of myself. Okay, so then second semester of college, I'm very much not focused because I've got my job and I'm just trying to get out of there. And they call me, I don't know, it was right before spring break, so probably February of 2009. It was somebody in HR from this company, and they said, hey, stock's not doing well, economy's not doing well, we're on a hiring freeze, your offer's still good, we just don't have a start date for you. I'm like, I'm this dumb college kid, like, what do you mean? What does that mean? And she's like, you need to go find another job. So I'm like, shit, signed a lease, whatever. And so I went back to a professor at that time. I didn't have a network of people, certainly not in Chicago. And he said, is that the industry you want to be in? Like, there's other companies that do that, and, I can reach out to them for you. And I said, sure, it seemed good enough, And so I ended up at a company, maybe 100 people, 150 people on the north side of Chicago, owned by a couple guys, but really one guy, really respected in the industry. Didn't realize that at the time. Came in, this is 2009. There was no glass door. There was no I don't even think LinkedIn was really a thing back then. So it was just show up on this day. Here's your 2 weeks of vacation. And, that was great. So graduated, moved up there. It was a sales role, right? And my job was to just call shippers and, here's the internet and here's a phone. Good luck. I've told you before, sales was like the first thing I was like really good at. And I didn't even know that I was good at. I had 70 grand of student debt. I was broke. Didn't feel broke. But, I'm starting to pay these interest payments on my loan. And I'm like, why is there no principal? Why is it not going down? That was a quick lesson in finance. But
if you waited, it'll be all forgiven now.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, the interest would have racked up. 10 grand wouldn't have gone very far.
Yeah.
I wasn't a good athlete. Honestly, wasn't even a great student. I loved college. I'm not sure I really liked class. But sales was like, wow, I'm really good at this. I had a quick start, started to have success, being kind of long-winded here. But it was great. I mean, it was one of those jobs where you could shoot the lights out, and that was my number one priority. I was a single guy that put everything into it, and it was awesome. That company continued to grow. Fast forward a couple years, my really good buddy from college, Matt Pyatt, who's my co-founder at Arrive, he moved up to Chicago. We were roommates, co-workers, carpool buddies, basically lived the same life. He was definitely more entrepreneurial, and the job honestly kind of catered to people that were entrepreneurial because it was really just a platform at the end of the day, and you kind of had to go out and make something of yourself. So he started approaching me probably in 2012 saying, hey, you're doing really well in sales. You're a good sales guy. I understand general business sense. I think, we could leave this and do our own thing. And I told him no for about a year. I was starting to date my now wife, and she was from Chicago. My family was close by, and I was making really good money. And so a year or so goes by. He starts basically harassing me and telling me why, I need to get the courage. I'll leave it at that. And at the time I was 25 or 26, right? And so we've all been there, right? You have this kind of confidence that you probably shouldn't have, but you have it. You feel like you've got the whole world figured out. But the reality was, at that age, I had a car, a cell phone payment, my loans were gone. That was really it. And whatever beer tab I was going to rack up for the weekend. I mean, that was my life. What risk did I really have, right? And so our underwriting was really, okay, well, let's go out and find some money, because you do need a lot of cash to run this business. I'll get into kind of why that is. If this thing fails, we'll go get another job, right? That was the worst case scenario, and we believed in ourselves that it wouldn't fail. But if it did, we're sales guys. We'll go figure something else out. Mm-hmm. And so Matt knew, he had a couple friends that were in Texas. They actually run a company now called Nutrabolt that maybe people that listen are familiar with. But at that time, this was 2013, much smaller. They weren't even called Nutrabolt yet, but they had just recapped their business. They had some liquidity. They also had some freight challenges. And so we just sat down together, and they were maybe 30, 31 at the time, 32. We were 25, 26, 27. And the vision was, hey, why don't you guys come down to Austin, stand this business up. You can start with our business as your first customer. That'll cover the expenses. That's kind of how we modeled the business. And if we make something of it, great. They were going to have to hire a consultant anyway. So the expenses they were really investing in the business basically just gave them a chance to launch a business out of it, if that makes sense. Yeah. And we're saying, okay, these guys are going to pony up the capital. They're going to pay us. We're going to learn a lot no matter what. And it seemed like the right thing to do. And so we quit our jobs in January of 2014, which is a weird time to be in Chicago, right? It's kind of go into hibernation. It's very cold. And we just kind of sat out. We had to not compete for 6 months. But we needed that time to really put the business together. Called a recruiter. Wasn't NAD, but it was a different company that really specialized in the space. And we put a team together of 10. We moved down to Austin. Used Tim Mooney actually to find our first space on Dirty Sixth, right above what I guess is now Eureka. Which I always tell people, my first piece of advice is, if you start a business, really in any city, don't do it on like the busiest street in town above a bar. It's a good way. You're just you're just stacking the deck against yourself. And so it was 10 guys in a room just trying to hustle and fake it till you make it and all that stuff. And so to fast forward, the company that I came from in Chicago ended up selling the year after. We didn't leave for that reason. We had no idea. We never left because we were unhappy. It was a great place to work. But they sold to a big public company. It was a tough integration. A lot of the folks, it ended up being a really good integration for them, but a lot of the people that I had worked alongside, it was just tough for them. And so they said, hey, would you guys put an office in Chicago? We'd love to come work with you. I'm like, wow, of course. So we figured out how to make it work for everybody, and we tied a lot of people in. I'll get into that later. But now it's just, instead of having me as the main salesperson, right, and Matt was selling too, but he was also kind of managing other parts of the business, now we have like 15, right? Well, of course we're going to start to grow. And so that was a fortunate break. We had to attract the people. We had to compensate them. We had to do all those things. But that was really an accelerant that started to grow the business. And so really 14, 15, 16, 17 was just Austin, Chicago. The business, you know, we started bringing in training classes of new salespeople, probably 6 or 8 months in, but 5, 6 people at a time. And to be quite honest, I'm skipping over a lot of stuff, but the business today has grown a lot. It's changed a lot, and we're going to get into kind of how that is. But if you look at the business today, so Austin is headquarters, there's 11 or 1,200 people in Austin. Chicago's 400 or 500. We've got, if you include BPO, people in Colombia, Philippines, we've got almost 2,500 employees. And what, you know, our space, there's 15,000 companies that do exactly what we do. Of just domestic truckload, which is a big chunk of the space, we're probably number 6 or 7. If you include everybody, we're probably number 10 or 12. We've raised a good amount of money, but from great investors that have really helped us, you know, think differently about the business. We've hired an unbelievable team. Obviously, you have to do that to scale to where we have. So what started as just, hey, let's go learn a lot and maybe we can start a business and work for ourselves, so to speak, has turned into what we never thought was possible.
Wow.
So we'll do $2.5 billion in revenue this year, and very profitable, and good culture, good environment, lots of happy customers, and it's pretty crazy.
Awesome.
Such a good story.
Yeah.
And what do you think the different? I mean, you mentioned 15,000 people.
Oh, by the way, I forgot one part. One of the guys on our board now, who's actually lives in Austin now, he's a good dude. He was the CFO of that big company that took my job offer out. And honestly, had that not happened, I probably would have stuck with the big company, which I always tell people too. It's good to get contrast. You can learn a lot at big companies, no doubt. And now we're kind of becoming that. But you can also learn a lot from a small business too. And you get exposed to a lot. And so you just need contrast, you need perspective. But what an ironic full circle moment that, you know, he didn't know who I was, right? And now they're sitting on the board of the company.
That's crazy. What do you feel is the differentiator? So I was going to ask, what is it like? Okay, so
Of
you
our
got 15,000. You got 15,000 companies that do what you do. You said you guys are 6 or whatever in the space now, and probably in a short time. I mean, you climbed up those ranks.
Yeah, everybody
quickly,
else is.
right?
There's one other company that's youngish, 25 years, I guess, if you can. Cause some of these companies are decades old.
Yeah,
public companies, et cetera. We're certainly the youngest private company on the list in the top 20, top 15. Yeah.
What do you think is the differentiator?
I don't know that it's one thing.
Differentiators.
You guys didn't figure something out that no one else really did?
Honestly, no. It wasn't like we dreamed up some, you know, we had vision for what we wanted the business to do, but we didn't think this far ahead, right? I think I'll say this, what's allowed us to grow really quickly, and whether that's a differentiator or not, I don't know. I think part of it is we were very intentional about our growth. Oftentimes what happens in our space is Nat and I are partners. We fund the business ourselves. We grow it slowly over 10 years. We're making good money. Our people are happy, and we stop.
Yeah.
You have to be a little crazy to want to hire 2,000 people in 7 or 8 years. Like, it's really hard to do. You break a lot of things. There's a lot of tough conversations. It doesn't always work, right? And so part of it is like the will to want to do that. Scale, when I got into this space, was not, you know, there's a lot of players in our space, but now the top 25 really own 2/3, if not more. Mm-hmm. So it'd be we could not probably do what we did today. It'd be very difficult. You would need a lot of money. You'd need to probably buy some, et cetera. So the cliche answer is people, which we're going to get into. We focused on one thing. Some companies, I think, try to do 4 or 5 things at once, and you know, maybe they half-ass or they do okay. We were really, really laser focused on one thing, and we did it really well. Also, the trend of shippers outsourcing, right? When shippers can't find trucks, they lean on companies like us.
Yeah.
We don't need to get into all the last 2 years. Everyone knows there was a big spotlight on supply chain, but that was a huge tailwind for our business. It's a service model is a little bit different. It's little things. You know, we've paid our people really well. We've tied a lot of people in. 20% of our company is owned by non-founders, non-investors. It's not. We've believed that if we can go out, if Nad's going to add, you know, make my company 1% more valuable, why would I not tie him in? So we've been able to attract a lot of people that I think some companies, the business owners, sit there and say, well, shit, I got to own the whole thing. You know, well, we were always like, we'd rather own a little of a lot, right? And a lot of little. And quite honestly, if we want to get this company to 2 billion, 3 billion, 5 billion, et cetera, well, I need a CFO that can take a company public. And we did. We took a guy that had taken Yeti public and others. And so you got to pay people, right? And so part of it was the will to want to grow. We brought in good investors. We focused on one thing. We've treated our people really well. We've attracted really good talent. You put all those things together and you're going to build a great business. Sounds really simple. It's not easy, but It wasn't that we've invested a tremendous amount in technology. Other companies have too. We're not the only one, but
well, and the vision,
we were able to execute, honestly.
You know, the vision that starts with you and Matt and how you guys, you know, you didn't scale this thing, at least from what I'm gathering, you didn't scale this thing with necessarily an end in mind.
Like we're going to sell it in 3 years and get out.
Yeah. And there's you mentioned some of these other businesses, and this is just, you know, in general, people that start businesses, they put I want to get this business to 20 million, to 25 million, to 100 million, or I want to build this team and get this team to 25 people. I mean, you know, there's just so many people that start with an end. And I'm reading Shoe Dogs right now. Have you read Shoe Dogs?
Phil Knight's book.
Yeah.
I have not. I've
It's
heard
good.
of it.
So literally the first page of the book, he said that like how he lived his life and how he grew his company was don't stop, just keep going. He said, I never knew where the end was. I just knew I had to keep going. And to this day, he still doesn't have, hey, let's get Nike to this. Let's, you know, touch this part of the world or whatever it is. He just, it's basically if you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah.
He keeps that focus on growth. I mean, it's one of y'all's mottos,
It's
right?
a cool
LFG.
feeling, and I can always tell. I go to a lot of conferences, and you know, we still are young. We were certainly young when we started, and people, the odds are we weren't going to execute what we were telling people we were going to do in terms of how big we wanted to get and all this. I remember meeting with a guy in Austin. I think he honestly thought we were insane. Like, we're going to do this, and we're going to do that, and we're going to do this. But now that we've, you know, we're not done, but we've accomplished a lot. It's cool to see how people's tone change. How are you doing this? Blah 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 blah. And so, again, I always joke. Matt and I get a lot of credit for things that a lot of other smart people are doing at the company. I'll take credit for starting the business and attracting great people. We built a really smart room, and you empower people, and you pay them well, and you create an environment where people want to win, and you can build a great business.
I want to go back to earlier in your story. You said you weren't a great athlete,
No,
weren't a great student, but you found out quickly
I'm
that
really ADHD. School was hard for me.
yeah. You said you're great at sales. Like, how did you realize that? And what characteristics do you think make you a great salesperson?
Okay. You know, Matt and I have complementary skill sets. I always joke I can read the room. He's good at reading the numbers. He can obviously read the room as well. I think it depends on what kind of sales you're talking about. Some people think sales is like, sell me this pen. You want to buy this pen? Sold.
Yeah.
You know, that's not oftentimes what sales is. I think sales honestly too has a bad connotation. I thought sales when I was in college was like, well, if I don't go to the big four, I don't get into consulting, I don't get into banking, all the other people just go into sales. It's just sales. Well, as we all know, I mean, sales is just that business development skill set is huge. And I've told that to several universities. A lot of universities now have sales programs, and I think that's great. Back to your question, I've always been a good relationship manager. I didn't necessarily know that at 20 or 21, 22. I've never been scared to work. So you do have to put in the hustle, certainly in sales, right? Our business is a lot, I'll compare it maybe to wealth management, where you can build out a really good book of relationships, and then it's not like I'm chasing the next deal. Some business, I sell capital equipment, the deal is sold, I never talk to Nat again.
Yep.
I got to go on to the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. And we want people to hunt all the time, but a lot of it's farming and nurturing relationships, and I think my ADHD fit well with our business. There's so much going on all the time. So some of it was the work ethic. A lot of it was just the EQ, the emotional intelligence piece.
Yeah.
And being able to relate to people that, you know, we're not selling to CEOs. I'm not selling an enterprise software product where I've got to be able to get in front of a CIO in a big room. And I could do that now, but at 22, I wouldn't have been able to do that.
Sure.
It's
So it's just relationship skills.
relationship skills.
Okay.
Yeah.
Being able to read people.
I think so.
Yeah.
How do
A
you
little
look
bit of luck
for,
along the way.
You know, let's bring that back to, you know, finding great people and
Yeah.
talent. What are the key skills that at Arrive you guys look for that makes somebody good at those relationship skills? How do you find that?
Well, it's not easy.
And you hire a lot.
We hire a lot of people. We'll hire over 1,000 people this year. We've got a great recruiting team. Nat's familiar with them. Actually, our very first recruiter is still with the business. Carrie has hired, I don't even know how many people.
Yeah, she's great.
She's great. And so how do we hire great people? It's a different game today than what it was back 5-6 years ago.
And why is that? Let's
Well,
start
I
there,
think
too.
number one, when we were small, we were a
Okay.
startup, that attracts a different type of person than
Yeah.
today. a lot of our energy goes into how do we build great relationships with universities, right? You start to figure out these universities are just job factories. And if you want the best people at UT or TCU or pick a school, you're not the only company, by the way, right? And so you've got to sponsor that sales competition or get in front of the class.
Totally.
We may sponsor a project at Miami for all the freshman business students, and it costs money, but we want our name in front of them, right? So by the time, so we're not even just thinking about how are we going to fill the hires for this fall and next year. One of the reasons we're opening new offices, and we have to announce it this fall, is because we're going to be on campus in the next few weeks, and we need to be able to talk about it because students are starting to think about where do I want to be next year when I graduate. So it's a machine. Back to your question of what qualities we look for, we hire for a lot of different roles today. We've got a product and engineering department that's several hundred people. We've got, I'll call it, we call them biz dev success, but it's really like a, customer operations type. That's a different skill set than the pure salesperson. So it's not just sales, honestly. It's a bulk of our people still today. We have a big group, we call them carrier sales that deal with trucking companies. It's more of a buying role. That's a different profile. So a lot of it is knowing what roles you're looking for, what the profile is. We've hired so many people now. Who fits where. We screen them, right, and try to rubric it down as much as we can. People still surprise you, right? It's a little bit of a crapshoot. I mean, our turnover definitely jumped in 2020 and 2021. Some of that's a factor of how many new people do you hire, right? Because the kid coming out of college today thinks differently than I did in 2009 when I was just thankful to have a job. And they just want different things. They expect different things, and that's their perspective. And I think we've built a good business, naturally, just kind of that caters to that. But when we get them in the door, and I meet with every training class, and they'll ask, well, what does it take to be successful, blah, blah, blah. And I always tell them, look, we can invest in everything that will prevent you from being successful. We try to bring in good leadership, good training, great technology, good capabilities, good place to come into work, whatever. But I don't control effort and attitude, and it's the obvious stuff. I mean, you got to want to win. I think sales, there's ups and downs. You've got to be able to have kind of a long-term view on your role. We do not want people that are just trying to leave in that first year. I always joke, you don't take our job for the base salary, right? If you're in sales, you're hopefully
upside.
Thinking about the upside, right? But we've had to rethink that too, and our cost structure's changed, our compensation models have changed, and now you're trying to make, the kid coming out of college today wants not, they want to know that my base salary is going to be this, and in the first year I'm going to make that. Second year I'm going to make this. It's like what a lot of these big companies start. It's almost like a military hierarchy, right? As you kind of move through, they want to get exposure to different things. And so we've had to cater to that. If you're going to spend a year in customer operations, you're going to do this, and here's your pay. And as opposed to when I was coming out, it was like, here's your base, and you can earn whatever. Well, that's hard for somebody at 22 to really understand. They're only comparing base. And so we've had Austin, the employment market's changed a lot. One of the reasons we're actively trying to get away from Austin, not leave Austin. I know we've talked about this. I mean, the employment market here is nuts. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I had to go back 8 or 9 years, knowing what I know today about where Austin is, that we would have started it here. I'm glad we did. I love living in Austin. But it's a really tough place to be an employer, especially with tech.
Yeah.
Well, and that's because everybody made the same decision that you guys made when you all made it. And LinkedIn.
Right. So we're part of the problem. But
they all came to town wanting the smart new grad out of college that was going to come in and
tech
work.
savvy.
They had access to a bunch of universities, and there was a lower cost of living. I mean, that's why everybody opened up offices from the Bay Area. Those Bay Area offices opened up here, those are just sales offices.
Yeah.
They were just inside sales reps. That's all they were. All of the executives and the tech talent was still up in the Bay Area. They were just hiring sales offices here.
Yep.
And then over the years, it evolved.
Yep.
And now we're, I think in Apple, I think this is Apple's second or third largest campus outside of Cupertino. I mean, it's just, but yeah, it's
great place to live, great place to work,
Yeah.
hard place to be.
Yeah.
Employer.
What mistakes did you make early on in terms of hiring
Oh my
that you
God.
don't repeat now?
I don't think we had an HR person until we had like 150 people. That was really stupid. Don't do that. And part of it was we didn't understand what HR was. We didn't understand. It's not just where you go to, get yelled at or,
or yell or do the yelling.
Nad was harassing Eric, and I need to go talk to somebody.
Yeah.
It's people strategy. We are more of an HR company today than we are a transportation company, and I mean it because it's all about people. We don't license software. We don't sell widgets. We bring people into a building, several buildings. We hire them, hopefully with the right people. We train them up. And then we have to make sure we're retaining them and they're performing and all those things. So hire, train, retain is kind of the motto we go by. But you need a lot of people that we should have invested that probably a little bit earlier. We figured it out, but so that was a mistake. I think sometimes too, when you're growing really, really fast, you can't just, like our accounting team as an example, in the early days, Matt and I understood the sales piece. We had been that role, right? We did a really good job with that, but the accounting piece we underinvested in early on. You can't just, it's hard to, I'll say unfuck it because I don't know what other word to use. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, you can say shit fucking.
Okay. I didn't know what I was allowed to say.
I got a story later about mailing shit we can talk about.
Oh, good. So the the sales piece we did fine. So that technology, we didn't understand how to build technology. I remember when we went out to, our angel investors put in a slug of cash. They did a couple chunks with us, and they finally got to a point like, guys, you need to bring on. First off, we don't want to keep funding this business. You guys are growing crazy fast. You need to go get a real slug of capital. And so we went and did a process. Thought we could kind of go, the bankers, oh, you guys could market it this way, blah, blah, blah. Our tech was in like the first inning. It wasn't even tech yet.
And the tech basically connects the trucking companies to the people who are shipping?
No, well, kind of. I mean, the technology is our operating system for our business, right? It's what our people use every day.
Yep.
It's what our carriers interact with. It's how we find the carriers. It's how we send information to shippers. But it's also the engine behind the business, right? It's, for every dollar that comes in of revenue, we're turning around and we're paying a big chunk of that to the truck. And so your cost per load is everything. We didn't even understand what that meant 8 years ago, right?
Yep.
How we look at contribution margins, all those things. So technology drives productivity. It makes our people's life easier. It allows them to focus on building relationships and not putting a blindfold on them like we did 8-9 years ago and saying, okay, call this person that, but like what I was doing 15 years ago.
Yep.
It also, it's the expectation now from these shippers, right? So if we can operate at a lower cost and still make our margin, you as the small guy will never be able to compete. And that's why venture capital has poured into this space in the last 5-6 years. Anyway, so we brought on a growth equity partner out of New York called Lead Edge Capital. They've backed a lot of companies in Austin. Bazaar Voice was actually their first portfolio company. And then once they really helped us think differently about technology, we brought in a real product team. I didn't even know what the hell product meant. I was like, So learned a lot there. That was a mistake of, I don't know about a mistake, but something we didn't understand, right?
Sure.
So it took longer than it needed to. So.
So like if someone listening to this probably like, all right, he started this not that long after college.
Right.
And now revenues project to be, $2.5 billion, not even 10 years, maybe 10 years into the business.
8 years.
8
yeah.
years. So
How is that
seems like the
possible?
trajectory's,
Right.
up and to the right, but like there's got to be some serious low points along the way or points
COVID
where,
was a low point, right? Everyone asks about the culture of the company. I always say like the culture of the company, the baseline of that's the values of the people in the company. I don't control. We control who we bring in.
Yep.
But the environment of the company has changed a lot, from being 10 idiots above a bar to now we're a very corporate company with several offices. COVID environment was terrible. Not only was, I can get into all the details. It was tough for everybody, right? No one knew what the hell it meant. We had shippers who were saying, well, I'm essential in this state, but not in this. I mean, you look at COVID totally jacked up the supply chain.
And you sent your workforce remote.
We sent workforce remote. Was a new thing for us. We laid 100 people off. That's never fun. We really had to tighten the belt, which before that was like grow at any, just who cares if you wrecked into that, keep growing, and so that was our mindset. And so that was a different move for us that we weren't familiar with, slow down to speed up. Fortunately for us, our space really took off about 3 months later. But having a virtual workforce was terrible. Not terrible. It was a huge change. Trying to hire some kid out of college that, who knows how they're thinking about the world. They're living in their parents' basement on a screen. We're trying to train them on the trucking business. And, you can only be so successful trying to do that. We had no office. So, yeah, that was tough. But the low points, that was certainly one of them. We haven't necessarily learned through failure, to be honest. And I say that very gratefully, not braggadociously, but figuring out our cash flow in the early days, was really tough. I'm thankful that we had great investors that backed us through those times, right? So, but it's just understanding the cost of business when you're growing really quickly, you need different things. So I know I'm not giving you a great answer here.
That's good.
That's fine.
That's what comes to mind.
I want to touch on something you said, and especially for people that are looking at building teams or joining teams, but the importance of retention, and more specifically retention in sales, right?
Yeah.
Because you've said this to me before, that you see real production in the second and third year, and if you're able to get somebody to those second, and in my business is the same way, and I would say for anybody building a sales team, that's something that is pretty standard, right? Mm-hmm. If you can get somebody to year 2, year 3, year 4, and you keep focusing on retention, they make more money, and it's more your top line, right?
That's right.
So retention is something that you guys focus on a lot.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, and look, our retention this year is down. Well, I guess I should say it has improved by 50% over what it was last year. Mm-hmm. Last year was not a great year, and the year before that was even more difficult. I think specifically to sales, if you ask one of our salespeople, what is the culture on the sales floor, I would say it's performance management, right? I don't mean that in a bad way. We have clear expectations of what winning looks like, what you're expected to do. Our managers understand what the expectations are, so they're able to communicate clearly with the reps. I think you have to bring people in that understand that you have to give clear expectations, right? And we've done a better job of that as of the last few years. But, they also want to work at a company where they feel like there's a good vision, there's a purpose behind the business, like what are we doing here? They want transparency. I know you guys do all company, all hands. We do a lot of that.
Yeah.
You're going to make them feel part of the team. In the early days, we had like this we thought retention was like, well, give them the no vacation policy, right? And we all know what that means. People take less vacation because they feel like they can. So we weren't always perfect, but I think it's just, for us, a lot of it's engagement, helping them become successful. At the end of the day, people leave sales because they're not having success, or they don't like sales. And anytime you're hiring a kid out of college, it's tough because they don't know what they want, right? And so
they're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Our HR team, we have an HR team and a talent team, right? And they're always engaging with these people, making sure they feel like they're getting the coaching they need. They feel like some people just have a hot start, like I did, but other people take some longer, and we don't want to lose those people. And so it's just a lot of communication, a lot of making clear what we expect them to do, but also giving them the resources to be successful. And I think at the end of the day, our job is to, bring people in, train them up, allow them to have success. Some people get burnt out, they want to do a different role, and that's fine. Other people, I always say, regardless of how long they stay at the company, I want them to stay there for a long time, but I just hope that they learn something that allows them to be successful in their career. And from a sales perspective, I think we've certainly lost people. We've lost people that I wish we didn't lose, and we could have done a better job with this or that, or maybe the manager wasn't the right fit for that personality, and we've done a better job of that too. Groups have gotten too big. All the things that, you ask about things we've screwed up. When you're growing that fast, it's hard to be perfect. But I don't say we've got it down to a science, but we've iterated on it a lot to where I think it works pretty well. Yeah. But naturally, sales organizations will have turnover. You want turnover too. We want to pressure test people quickly. Yeah. If this isn't the right fit, the worst thing anybody could do is stay in a job that's just not. They're not gonna enjoy it. They're not gonna work out for the company. And so that first year, really for us, is making sure that we've got people in the right roles, and then our managers can really develop people that are set up to succeed.
Well, you brought something up that's relevant these days. There's this term, you might have heard of it. Media's talking a lot about it. It's called quiet quitting.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Yeah. Have you heard of it, Ned?
Well, I have.
You're just kind of mailing it in, right?
What's the definition?
Well, I think the reason why it's like so big in the media now and people are talking about writing articles is because there's a lot of different interpretations. My interpretation is this movement of people who are not really tied emotionally to the company. Maybe they're just doing it for the paycheck, and they're not going to do anything above and beyond. But I think other people are taking it different ways. But it kind of goes to what you were saying about people who, if they're not enjoying it, you don't want them to be there, type thing.
And they shouldn't want to be there either.
And they shouldn't want it, yeah. So, but in remote environments, I think this that's conducive to maybe that behavior where people don't feel as connected to the company,
right,
and they feel like they can coast by because maybe it's such a big company and they're working remotely, so they're not as visible. Mm-hmm. So it's like easier to coast by. I think in sales environments that would be difficult. Like your number's your number, right?
You just hit it on the head. Yeah, I don't think we have that issue. I'm sure we have people that. I mean, there was a couple times in the early days. Was it Zappos or somebody's like, "I'll pay you to quit." Yeah. I remember the only kid that quit had been there for like 2 weeks. Guy gets like, a month of pay. Hadn't even been there a month. But
sales you can measure out. Sales you can measure out.
Yeah, there's a scoreboard.
That's where you're going, right? And this is where, and I've talked about this before in this post-COVID world where there's so many hybrid environments now. We're hybrid. There's all these hybrid environments. Are you guys hybrid or are you all in?
I'll say hybrid. However, if you were to look at, you have to be in the office the first year. And it's not because we don't believe in remote work. It's because we want them to be successful. And we believe that they're going to be most successful learning in the office.
Yeah, it's true.
As they hit certain tenures, then they can go remote.
So it's the idea of measuring output, right? If we can figure out how to measure output for every single function that we have in our companies, then you don't have to worry about when somebody's in the office or when they're not. You got to worry about how they're learning, right? How they're learning, how they're
making
training,
sure they're
how
connected
they're
to the business,
and how they're connecting. But how can we measure output in a finance role? How can you measure output in a marketing role? There are ways. It's just it wasn't as big of a thing as it always was. Sales was easy. I mean, salespeople have been working out of their house and traveling for years. This wasn't anything new to a salesperson. Now your team, being a lot of inside sales and new grads, they got to learn the business, they got to collaborate, they got to be part of the culture. But sales had ways to measure output. It's how some of these companies that figure out how to put output requirements on other functions.
Yep.
I think to me it's a really neat outcome that came out of COVID, right?
Yeah,
and how we figured it out.
I just hope for those people they realize they're, at the end of the day, if they leave, most of these companies are still going to be just fine. They're going to move on and bring somebody else in. What are you doing, right? I mean, go find a job that you can, move forward in and have success. So, but I did see that it came out a few weeks ago.
Yeah. How are you adjusting? Like, imagine with the growth of the company, every 6 months your role changes.
Oh yeah.
Not necessarily your title per se, but what's expected of you and what the company needs from you.
Sure.
Has that been a lot of growing pains, or for you has it been natural?
Both. I think at the end of the day, you have to know what you're good at, right? I've learned a lot, obviously, but I've also known at the speed at which the business is growing, it's not possible for me to grow at that same speed. Where my age was, or my experience was, if I did it again, I would obviously know a lot more than I did the first time. Is my role, first couple of years I was a salesperson. I was also running the company. Mm-hmm. Then I was managing managers. Then I was managing managers that managed other managers. I mean, so maybe into 2018 or so, it got to the point where what I really liked to do was close deals, develop good salespeople. I'm a sales guy. All right, that's what I wanted to do. But that wasn't what I was doing. I was forecasting and dealing with HR and the things that happen as your company grows. And so, I think I was talking to one of our board members. I'm like, it's just. It wasn't that I necessarily felt like I couldn't do it. I don't know that I was getting the most fulfillment. I was like, well, you got to go find somebody that create the role that you want to do, right? And so we did. We found out a great CRO has done an amazing job. Learned a lot from him. Learned more from him. Just really admire how he runs the business now. And so I'm able to focus on the things I like. I was visiting a customer yesterday, and so that's most of my time is spent on the road with customers or engaging with our people.
Yep.
And I kind of get to stay away from the people challenges
and
that I didn't really
enjoy that part of your job.
I
That's
enjoy
the thing,
it.
right? It's you get to a point where you do. We talked about this in our last podcast. You do every job so you can find somebody who can do it better than you.
Exactly.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then do what you like doing. Right there. I heard I think it was Vern Harnish. When I heard Vern speak, he said he gave these examples of this CEO who had grown a business, and the part of his job that he enjoyed the most was customer success. He just wanted to make sure his customers were happy all the time.
Yep.
So he hired people to do every other job, and he became the chief customer success officer because it's what he wanted to do.
Yep.
And he figured out other people that can do the rest of those jobs better than him.
My real title should probably be chief customer officer. I'm not a title guy. But I'll say a couple of things. Number one, I just want to help the business win. I don't care what my title is. I'm not a title guy at this point. Were there vulnerable points in there where everyone knows when they kind of feel like they're sinking a little bit or they're not? They're a little bit lost, and that's never fun. And I'll admit too that as the founder, I probably had a luxury that many that others didn't have, which was I had the ability to say, hey, you know, I'm going to create kind of a role for myself. But again, I had to help the business win. And so you asked about low points earlier. There were certainly times, there have been several times where, you know, a lot of people join a company when it's young and they expect, well, my name's Nad and I was here year one, so I'm naturally just going to like keep being the guy, you know, and somebody new comes in with a different set of skills, a different set of experience, and all of a sudden they get not necessarily pushed out, but demoted. And so those were a lot of hard conversations, right? And they couldn't just say, well, I'm going to create a new role for myself. So I recognized that I was fortunate to be able to do that. But yeah, most founders can't, you know, they can scale with the business, but the idea of like running the company, to Nad's point, there are smarter, more experienced people that will ultimately make the company be a lot more valuable and do a much better job. So bring them in. But that's a hard thing for some people to do.
Yeah. What about that co-founder relationship? How's that changed over the years?
I hope Matt listens to this. Matt and I have been really close friends for, I don't know, half our life now. Officiated his wedding a year ago. So we're very, very close. I think early on, and some people say don't get into business with friends or whatever. I think for us it was an advantage. Now certainly, and Nat and I've talked about this, it changes the relationship. Even in a positive way, it still changes the relationship. But we trust each other. We know each other. There's always, people go at it, right? And we've had our, you know, there's times where he's had to call me out for different things, and he was right, and vice versa. But at the end of the day, we both wanted the same things. Matt is an unbelievable leader. He's got great vision. He understands numbers. I think I've gotten more dumb with numbers because I don't have to think about it because he's so fast. It's like, why am I even going to try to keep up? So if I really thought hard about it, the early days, we were probably in each other's way a little bit. That's just natural with having a small team. And then really had to define our roles in that first year or two. We've hired great executive coaches that have really helped us think about the business. And our relationship's probably never been better, right, than where it is in the last couple of years. Part of that's because the business has probably had a lot of success. But really, you know, we're friends first. And I'm really proud of him and how far he's come. And I think he'd probably say the same for me. So we're maybe the anomaly in a way. I know sometimes people have horror stories. That's not our story.
You know this. One of my best friends is my VP of operations and close business partner, and it's sort of a yin yang type thing. What am I good at that he's good at, and vice versa. I don't know. I think we've known each other for 30 years. I think getting into business with friends is great if you set the parameters. Right, you set the expectations and the parameters and the boundaries early on to know, hey, look, if this works, if it doesn't work, our friendship comes first, right? And just the different conversations that people sometimes have around that is huge, and a lot of times they don't have them. And what I've seen there's so many stories that you can. How close were Wozniak and Jobs, right? Those guys were working out of a garage together, and from all the documentaries I've read, he treated Woz like shit, but at the end of the day, valued him more than he ever was able to share. Right.
Well, if you have a foundation of a relationship with someone, I talk about this a lot, but you can have tough conversations with them, and you know it's not going to damage there's going to be fewer hurt feelings, I think. Whereas if you don't have a great relationship with someone, you have a tough conversation, they may be telling themselves stories like, this person hates me, or they don't like me. And it makes your life easier also because, for instance, Tony, one of the other co-founders, and Heather, both of them, they know we have that foundation of a relationship. So I can send them an email and I don't need to add formalities and pleasantries to the email. I can be like, hey, I need this done. And they're not going to automatically interpret that as, oh, Nick's pissed. Like, I can just get straight to the point and no hurt feelings. So I always tell people, like, spend the time on building that foundation of relationship because it will save you time in the long run. And it'll save you even more than that, like headaches, less drama, right?
And it's the investment of that time, right? The retreats, the gatherings, the offsites. Like when you first start a company, people are like, we don't need to spend time. But the relationships that we build over that time are extremely important, right? We talk a lot about vulnerability. How vulnerable are you getting with your teams? How, what's the trust factor? But we talk about this a lot in EO, an organization that Eric and I are a part of, but it's huge as you build that foundation.
Yeah, because if people know you on a personal level, then they understand more of the motives behind some of the decisions perhaps that you're making in the business.
Yeah.
So there's a few levels to that.
Well, I feel like this is applicable, so I'm going to share it.
He's going to go there.
Oh, there we go.
because you ship a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
I went to the doctor this morning for the first time, and I'm 45 now and haven't been to the doctor since I was 30. You know this because I'm always talking about establishing care. I did. Got blood work done, and when you turn 50, you have to have a colonoscopy. When you turn 45,
Now it's 45. I think they dropped it.
well, no, I was just there.
Yeah.
So I'm 45, and instead of having a colonoscopy, I now have a kit that was handed to me that I take home, and I
I know where you're going.
Yeah.
take a shit in it,
Yeah.
right? And then I close it, and I seal it, and I put it into a box, and I ship it.
Yep.
And so this is the first I've ever heard of this. So it made me think. I'm like, people are just now shipping shit. Like, this is what we're doing. This is a thing now where there's like, how many times
I hope it's refrigerated.
How many times do you think the mailman or the UPS man, it's preserved? They put preservatives around it.
Okay.
There's a solution that you put around the sample.
This just
before
turned
you stick
into
it in the mail.
went from PG-13 to,
No, it's just vulnerability.
Yeah.
We're just being vulnerable here.
Well,
But it's just.
Dude, I would rather
somebody's
Side note,
doing
it's
it.
fascinating to me that
Yeah.
that's a thing now.
The
And
old
things that
line
are
is
being
if you
shipped.
bought it, a truck brought it. So yeah, somebody's shipping.
Yeah.
Your stuff.
What's the story? I just finished the book on the guy from Austin, from Westlake, that started the drug shipping.
Silk Road.
Silk Road. Yeah, Silk Road. This guy was shipping
illicit
put
drugs?
it all online and
Yeah.
was basically mailing drugs
Yep.
back and forth for years.
Just
Now
for the
now he's in
listeners,
jail.
most of our business is food and beverage, grocery.
Yeah, this is not
Okay.
E-commerce.
You're not
stuff,
shipping.
building materials.
You're not shipping shit. I just
We're
wanted
not
to
in the
tell my-
medical space.
Since we're nearing a wrap up, I figured it was a good wrap up story.
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see if it gets edited out or not.
Yeah.
We'll see what the video
That's
production
hilarious.
team thinks about this one.
What?
But seriously,
So you talked about groceries quick. Let's
Yeah.
just transition away from that. The stench. Do you guys have accounts with big grocery store chains, or grocery store chains will use multiple different brokerages?
Yeah, good question. Yes, we ship for, well, I'll just kind of break out the business. About 40% of it is food, beverage, CPG, grocery, retail, all the major suspects that you would expect. Every aisle of the grocery store, frozen, fresh, you name it. Industrials, I'll say, kind of your oddball manufacturing stuff, from chemicals to, again, from the shampoo you put in your hair to the stuff you didn't even think about. If you don't really think about manufacturing, you realize, like, wow, there's a whole process, this multi-billion-dollar companies that you've never heard of, that are making one little piece of, et cetera. So a lot of industrials, auto's huge. We ship for the government. We ship for, I'm trying to think of what's something really odd. We did a lot of FEMA work during COVID. That was
Yep.
really interesting. So yeah, as far as, tell me the question again.
So yeah, the biggest kind of industries, and will like an HEB sign a deal?
Oh, yeah.
with,
Who
like,
would they
always
work with?
Yeah.
So yeah, so I would say in general, large shippers, like massive shippers, have majority of their spend with asset carriers, right? People that actually own trucks, and that's kind of the foundation of the network, and that's great. And so maybe 20-30% of it goes to brokers. When I got into this business, maybe it was 10. So the trend of outsourcing has continued to grow. They don't just work with one provider, which I think is probably a benefit to us. And
Sure.
one of the tailwinds we've also had is that back in the day, there were really only, I'd say, a handful of companies that could ship for the big enterprise clients. And now, as more have popped up, those enterprise clients want to say, well, I don't want to spend so much with NAD. I want to diversify that out across 5 NADs, right?
Yep.
And so we'd probably benefit from that as well. So yeah, it's all, a large shipper may use 8 or 10 people just like us, and the relationship could be great. The service is great. At the end of the day, our customers sit at an intersection of giant cost center, right? They're spending hundreds of millions of dollars a year on transportation. And it's just, they're customer service as well. They're trying to get freight moved from A to B on time. So the difference between you being in 1 or 2 or 3 versus 7, 8, or 9 is ultimately how you price it. And so we have a ton of data people. We have PhDs in data science that are constantly trying to figure out and forecast where the market's going to go. We have really smart people that are trying to predict the impossible. And so, but yes, to answer your question, they work with
Okay.
other companies too.
Here's a hypothetical for you.
Yeah,
Let's say tomorrow, autonomous trucking becomes a thing.
I hope it does.
Well, how's that impact your business?
Well, first off, autonomous is already here. And autonomous, for safety reasons, is great. We should all all your viewers should be very careful when they're on the highway. Most of the truck accidents you see actually happen from people not respecting the fact that 80,000 pounds of metal and freight is moving down the highway. You probably shouldn't cut them off and slam on your brakes and all that stuff. It's not a safe. It can be very unsafe at times, unfortunately. So the autonomous stuff, just like in our cars, it's great that it's there. I think the driverless trucks is what you're talking about.
Yeah, sorry.
I'll say a few things. I think in general, people probably underestimate technology in the short term, or excuse me, overestimate it in the short term and underestimate it in the long term. They're testing a lot of stuff. They're working with the government trying to figure it out. But really how it will be applied by most accounts is what we'll call corridors, right? And so let's use Dallas to Austin as an example. You drop a trailer in Waxahachie, there will be a lane on 35 that'll get dropped off in, I don't know, town north of Austin, and you'll have trucks just constantly glowing, platooning, you hear them talk about sometimes. And ultimately, who gets to benefit from that? Well, the consumer does, but shipping companies with a lot of density that have the volume that can do that. At the end of the day, we're supporting shippers, right? Mm-hmm. I don't even know where we fall. We're definitely a top 100 shipper in the country, probably around there. And so your big brokers will become the clearinghouse for shipping, depending on what mode they specialize in. And so for us, it's something that we talk to those companies that are doing it. We're watching it very closely. I think we're still quite a ways away. But we would certainly take advantage because we have the density to ship all these different corridors, these lanes that you're talking about. So it's coming. I don't know when.
So the autonomous trucking where there's a driver, but they're only there in case the computer screws something up so they can grab the wheel. That's happening in what percentage of the trucking industry right now?
I'd say less than 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
But growing.
Yeah.
It's like lane assist, right? Like
Yep.
lane assist on a car.
Like I was at a trade show in Northwest Arkansas a few months back, and it's really cool. I mean, the technology's cool, and the application's there. There's some hurdles they have to clear, and I think people are very bullish on what they're going to do long term. So ultimately, it's got to be cost effective for it's got to be safe, all these things, and so they're working through it. So I don't know if that's 15 years away, 8 years away, 25 years away, but it won't be here tomorrow, and so it's not like it's going to hit us out of left field. And I think there will probably be a day where companies like Arrive are using that technology.
Got it.
Be pretty nuts. You ever see the Chick-fil-A thing downtown, like the robot that's delivering chicken sandwiches?
Yeah.
I haven't seen that.
I think drones are coming, like within months, not years. I mean, you hear all this hype about. That's gonna be weird when you're outside and you got drones dropping off packages in your driveway.
It's Terminator, man.
Yeah, it's
It's
crazy.
all Terminator / Back to the Future Part 2 type stuff.
Dropping people off at work on a drone, and no more commutes.
I watched Back to the Future 2 last night with my 8-year-old and 10-year-old, just trying to get nostalgic with them.
You should watch John Mulaney's definition of Back to the Future. I won't talk about it, but people can watch that in their free time.
But yeah, and then Terminator, right? All the computers taking over. It's happening. It's happening. It's a good thing. It's just how we manage technology. Eric, you've got young kids. They're going to grow up in a world where, just managing. All of us do, but managing, how they're dealing with technology is something we're facing every day right now.
Yeah.
So,
well, we really appreciate you joining us for this podcast. Last question: talk about the next year to 3 years to 5 years for Arrive Logistics. Where do you want to see it go? Where do you think it will be going?
Where's Eric going?
I'll try to answer all that. So the biggest challenges for the business, or the biggest things we're focusing on, I should say, more offices, right? Austin, Chicago are very competitive. It's not even that they're competitive. The employment market's competitive everywhere. I'm sure Nat can speak to that. It's a big burden on our recruiting team to say, hey, I want you to hire 1,000 people this year, but only into 2 markets.
Yeah.
And so it gives them a little reprieve to say, you've got Phoenix, you've got Dallas, you've got Tampa, you've got places where young people want to be, and now you have to hire, 200 people in 5 markets versus 500 people in 2. And so we're working on that, more multimodal, right? I said we focused a lot on domestic trucking. We purchased a company out of Guadalajara in January, so we've bought a company in Mexico. We're kind of at a weird point where even though we want to get into other modes, the idea of building it organically, you can't keep up with the pace of the business, right? And so M&A starts to make sense. So you'll see some M&A, more multimodal, freight forwarding, trailer rental, other words you guys probably don't care about, intermodal, stuff like that. But I hope the environment of the office, that's going to continue to change. I hope the culture of the company doesn't change all that much. So long as I'm there, I don't think it will. I'm going to be there as long as I can help the business win, and as long as I'm fulfilled and adding value to the company, right? And if there comes a day where that doesn't make sense, then all dressed. I've got 3 young kids. Wife wants to have a 4th, so she doesn't want me around anyway. If I'm being honest.
I love that you said you still spend time with all the training classes.
Sure,
that's great.
I'm a people person first, right? And so, I think it's important that my door's usually open. I get slacks all the time from. I always try to answer. I'm not always answering it right away, but
Yep.
People tend to think that successful people have all the answers and that you should listen to them. At the end of the day, we're all just people, right? And so I try to they don't need to treat me any differently than you would treat, Richard, the guy that manages our facilities, or anything else. And so try to keep it as flat as possible and help them win. But yeah.
Nice.
Good advice for all of us.
Yeah. Some good nuggets there. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks for
good to be here.
Yeah.